In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a 3D motion trail in After Effects, where you can take this, do this, and end up with something like this.
That's sick.
Hi, I'm Adam Bennett, this is Video Shop. The benefit of this approach is it's totally procedural. You'll create a rig which, once you've set everything up, all you need to do is drop in your footage and it outputs this effect.
That's rad.
After that, all you need to do is adjust the settings for whatever project you're working on, and you can reuse the rig for anything you like, such as collage style animation or kinetic type. You'll have 3D layers, so there's a lot of creative scope. You can push the layers in Z space and add camera moves if you want. If you can't be asked to set this up and you just want to play around with the rig, I won't judge you. You'll find a link for it in the description below. But stay tuned if you want to set it up yourself or know how to use it. After that, I'll show you how I used it for this animation. Okay, let's get started. The hardest part of this technique is cutting out the footage, but now with AI that's getting more and more easy. Also, the Rotobrush in After Effects is regularly improved and updated. This clip didn't take long at all. And you don't even need to have roto footage. You could be working with a sequence of images or do a junk matte on footage. I talked about this animation in a previous video, and this uses the same rig, so if you've already seen that, you can skip to the end of this video. I'm going to use this dancing clip, which I've already cut out. The footage is 24 frames a second, but you can work to whatever frame rate you like. We'll set up a controller for this rig later where you input the frame rate. You'll just need to make sure that all your comps are the same frame rate. So the way the rig works is you have a comp that you drop your footage into, and then the main comp where the rig controllers are. So our breakdancing footage is in this comp here. I'm going to drag that comp into our main comp, just turn off the audio, then time remap it, and then just put a hold keyframe. I'm going to rename that footage, comma, space 01. So that comma, and then the space and the number is important, as you'll see in a second. The footage, you can call it anything before the comma for what we're going to do here. If you're new to expressions, I definitely recommend checking out this tutorial first, as I talk about the expression that we're going to be looking at, which is going to feature heavily in a lot of the animation that you're going to see. We're going to add a slider control to this, and then add this expression to the slider. So this is the expression that I talk about in that tutorial, thisLayer.name.split, and if you watch that, you'll know that the 1 here refers to the number after the comma. So that's going to make it nice and easy when we set up all the expressions and controls on this layer, and then we can just duplicate it. Each subsequent layer will have a different number, and we can spread them out in X space and various other stuff. I'm going to rename that slider control X. So you can see here it's outputting a value of 1. So now when we duplicate that, it'll be 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that. So I'm going to add a null, and then rename it control. So if you've watched any of my tutorials, this is pretty much what I do for every single project. Have a control null, and then it's easy to control things because you've got that top null layer with various expression controls and sliders and whatever, or colors. I'm going to add a slider control to that. We're going to name this time space hyphen space start, and then duplicate that, and this one we'll name difference. These are going to control the timing on all of our layers. So now we're going to take this expression and apply it to our time remapping of the layer. So the TD is looking at the time difference over here. The X is our layer value, if you will. So in this case it's 1, but then when we've got say 100 layers, on the 100th layer X will equal 100. TS is the time start. At the moment it's starting at 0, so this bit of footage will be starting at the very beginning. Then this last line we've just got time start plus whatever time difference we want multiplied by X, which is the layer value. So if we don't have any time difference, every copy of our footage will just be at frame 0. But actually not frame 0 because we've got footage, 01, but we'll fix that in a second. So to make it easier to see what's going on, let's add a visible timecode into this comp. So create a new solid, add the timecode effect. So uncheck composite on original, and we'll just change this to frames. Toggle transparency here, just drag this over. Don't want all those zeros, so let's just trim that, the linear wipe. TC for timecode, and we'll just lock that. Okay, so just to check that this is working, let's adjust our time difference. Now I'm going to add a value of 0.1, so this immediately jumps to the second frame. And then our duplicates, we've got frame 7, frame 9, frame 16. So we know it's working. But our footage 11 is on frame 26. Okay, so if we want our first layer to start at frame 0, I can just duplicate any layer and rename it, comma 0, 0. Okay, so that's starting at frame 0. But if we wanted, say, every subsequent layer to be a frame, we need to go into our time difference and do 1 second divided by 24 frames, and that is what our time difference needs to be. So now this is frame 11. One thing you can do if you plan on using the rig on different projects and therefore potentially different frame rates is this. Add another slider and name it comp frame rate. Then for the time difference controller, instead of manually inputting 1 divided by 24, we'll set an expression for it. We'll put 1 divided by, then pig whip to the comp frame rate value. This way, not only is it easy to change the frame rate on the time difference, but someone jumping on your project can see what frame rate you're working to. I'm going to delete all those because we've got a few more things to add. Okay, P for position. I'm going to make this a 3D layer and right click and separate dimensions. I want to expression control how they spread out on the x-axis. So I'm going to duplicate this slider control and call it X spread. Give it a value of 10 for now, and then we're going to add this expression to the X position. Spread equals, then it's looking at that X spread control that we just created. X equals, and that's our layer number given by our layer.name.split expression. Then finally value plus spread times that X value. Nothing sexier than reading out expressions. So now to check that it works, okay, so we need to set everything up with a comp that's comma 01, because then when you duplicate it, you get 02, 03. Doesn't matter, they're still numbers, but I'm kind of anal, so anyway. We've got comma 01, 02, 03, 04, press P for position, and now you can see these red numbers, expression controlled, and if we just bump that value up a bit, okay, so they're spreading out 100 pixels each on the X. And because the expression's value plus, you can still move them around, so that's good. So we want to set up a similar thing on the Z position. So let's add a camera. Standard camera is fine. We can tweak the settings later on, depending on what we want. I'm going to duplicate the X spread control and just call it Z spread, which is not catchy. Z spread, which are American. And we can just copy the expression only and then paste that onto the Z position. And then all we need to do is go into that expression, change that X to a Z. And let's just check that that's working. So we'll set the Z spread to 200. Then we'll duplicate that a bunch of times. And then just check our top view here. Zoom in. And if we set this to 0, they're all lining up. And then if we bump this up to 300, yeah. Okay, so they're working. I'll put this back to 0 for now. And again, delete those. Still more to add. So next I'm going to add a layer count expression. Now we may not even use this, but it's something that's handy to have. You may develop this rig and add some fancier or more elegant expression controls than what I'm going to show you. But I think it's just good to have something that counts the total number of layers that you've got. And then you can work that value into expressions. So we'll just pop it on, and if we don't end up using it, it's fine. So we'll go to our control null again and just duplicate that slider, and we'll call this layer count. And then we're going to add this expression. So now when we enter that, it gives us a value of 1. And if we just duplicate this layer, it's gone up to 3. So it's counted the number of footage layers. Just delete those again. Because we could end up with hundreds of layers once this is all set up, what I want to be able to do is easily turn them on or off without actually having to manually keyframe the opacity value.
What the hell are you talking about?
It'll make sense in a second. Okay, so we're going to duplicate that Z spread controller, and then we're going to call these layers start and layers end. And then we're going to add this expression to the opacity. This is looking at the layer's end value, and depending on what we have set for that, it's either going to be on or off, depending on what number this layer is. So if we set that to be 4, it's going to be on, because this is layer 01. But if we duplicate it a whole bunch of times, layer 5 is off, whereas the other ones are on, because we're ending at 04. Now if we set the layers start to 2, we don't have anything driving that at the moment. We're going to add the transform control to our footage 01, and that's got an opacity value there. And we can add a similar expression to that. So similar to the expression on the main opacity, this last line is saying if x, which is our layer number, is greater than or equal to y, which is our layer start value, output a value of 100, otherwise 0. There's probably a way of bundling everything into the same expression on the opacity, but I'm not clever enough to know what it is. But just for the sake of getting it done, this is the way that I've done it. So let's just check that both of those expressions work. So I'm going to copy and paste that transform effect to the other layers. And just spread these out. So we've got layers 2, 3, and 4 visible, because it starts at 2, ends at 4. We set that to 3 instead. We've only got 3 and 4. And if we set that to 3, only 3 is visible. So that's working. And that's it for creating the rig itself. You've now got something you can amend or customize to create effects like these. All the expressions we've looked at here are in the description below for you to copy and paste if you need to.
You got it.
So now let's look at this animation. I'm not going to do a step-by-step tutorial for it because I don't know how interesting that will be. I can't be bothered anyway. But the whole workflow, which you're seeing now, I've uploaded it. It's a few hours long, so that's on my sister channel, the Video Shop Long Play. There's a link in the description if there's any particular technique that you're interested in. But basically what this does is it uses the rig, and then there's just a few other graphical elements. What I will say is, depending on what you're animating, some things are easier than others. So for this animation, if you remove a person from the background entirely and have them isolated, that's pretty easy with the rig. What's trickier is integrating your cutout elements into the footage that you've cut them out from, if that makes sense. So it's probably easier to show you. So here, if I just turn off the clean plate, and then I'm just going to solo the background layers and the cutout. And actually what I'll do is just turn off the text layers here. Okay, so let's preview this. So this looks janky as hell. So like here, like when you're sort of seeing it's kind of floating around, because with this shot, like when you cut out the element and you have the motion trail, you kind of want some good camera tracking or like object tracking or whatever thrown into the mix, because with this I've just kind of guessed, well not guessed, but I've actually gone into the roto of this guy, well not this guy, Tom Schaar. Let's give him some credit. And I've just sort of guessed the trajectory of him jumping up and then sort of landing. It's not meant to be sort of perfectly tracked or anything like that. It's just so he sort of goes high enough and you've got like sort of a curve on the roto. Otherwise, it's without that, it's all in the same place. In fact, I'll show you. Because obviously the camera's following him. Okay, so it's moving up. So to disguise the jankiness of, you know, the lack of tracking, which you could do if you could be bothered, if you wanted to, is I've added these not very subtle color wipes onto the background. So you're doing the same thing. You're isolating him against the background, but the main elements of this animation are what we just looked at, which is you've got the rig itself with all the duplicated layers that are, you know, expression controlled. And like keyframe wise on these, I've got the layers end just animating in a linear fashion from 0 to 65, because I've got 65 layers here. And then to have them animate off, I've animated the layer start, which goes from 0, but then I'm animating them off here. So at the very end, we end up with like sort of one layer. And it's interesting. That's what the curve looks like in the graph editor. So I just wanted that one frame where you've got like sort of a couple, two toms. And then the other thing I've done is, and it's kind of subtle because I didn't want much of a perspective shift, is where he jumps up, I wanted him to come in front of this text card. So there's a very slight Z spread, like sort of 0.1, but it's enough. You can't see the difference in the layers here, but there's enough so that he's behind this text card here. So the position in Z space of these, so text bar 02 is minus 3.5, and then if we look at these layers, we can see the Z is sort of moving ever so slightly here. So there's nothing to stop you put in text elements or other elements in, you know, this is essentially the master comp, but it was just easier to have that in this final comp where I've just added in some other things. So, you know, like a light leak on top, again, just to sort of slightly disguise the, you know, the overall sort of shitness of certain things. And the other thing is, what you might need to do is, you know, create a clean plate, because what was kind of distracting was, you know, the camera moves up here, you know, you've got this sort of bit up here. So then I've just so you want to use the content aware fill for that, and you know, it hasn't been perfect. I've sort of, you know, it's like sort of a hacky job, but again, it's fine for, you know, for what we've got here. That's pretty much it. The style of the graphics was sort of half copying the branding of the BBC Olympics coverage, and that's actually where I saw this clip of Simone Biles, and it kind of reminded me of this rig, so hence this video. So I actually started an animation using some footage of Simone Biles for I keep wanting to say Biles, idiot, Simone Biles for this, but it just wasn't working. I abandoned it, it wasn't working, but maybe it could have ended up being good, but you can tell it's not very good. But just for the sake of playing around with the rig, I used a different technique for like creating a clean background for this. So what I did was take the frame where I start the roto of her, took that into Photoshop, and then did generative fill to sort of extend it out. Hence, you've got this sort of Olympics 2024 banner, and then generative fill interprets that as whatever this is. So on this, I've got a camera move on the layers, so they're sort of sequenced, so they're sort of slightly forward, and then they're slightly to the right, and then the camera's sort of moving across, hence needing this extended background. But this is pretty terrible. And then similarly with the Tom Schaar animation, so I've not only animated the roto, sort of moving up and then down, then in the rig itself, I've got the camera following that roto as well to sort of emulate, the move. So you're sort of essentially creating your own camera move for the animation. But like I say, this is sort of pretty hacky, and you can watch the process video if you want to sort of see how I did it, kind of pulling my hair out. And that's it for this video. Hope it was useful. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.